Please give it up for Justin.
Thank you. So the name of my talk is that Ethereum is dying without layer 1 scaling. It's obviously very clickbaity, but I mean it. And I think we're at a crossroads. I did a talk here last year on a similar subject, and I think on some ways I've been somewhat validated in my position. I am obviously a critic of modular scaling. I'm a critic of layer 2 scaling. I think it's the wrong way to scale a blockchain. I really think it's a losing strategy. And if Ethereum continues on its current path, I am convinced it will lose to competitors. Fragmentation has been mentioned a lot here today, which I think is great. One of the differences from when I did this talk last year is that a lot of the core devs have actually acknowledged the problem. This is why they talk about shared sequencing as a potential solution for that problem. In this talk, I'm going to explain why it's not a good solution to the fragmentation problem. And I'm even going to go so far as to say that technologically, this is solvable. And I'm really, especially want to drive this home to a lot of the developers in the room. But there's a difference between a problem being solvable from a technological perspective to a problem being solvable from a political, from a social, and a social coordination perspective. And I think that's the part that a lot of people are missing in this entire equation. The problem with fragmentation today, and if we look at the Ethereum ecosystem today, I would argue that you have the optimism ecosystem over here. You have the Arbitrum ecosystem over there. You have the ZK Sync, the Eigenlayer, etc., etc. You have all these separate ecosystems. And you also have the Ethereum ecosystem over there. Do you realize what I just did there? Do you realize what I'm doing here? I'm saying these are separate ecosystems. These are separate competing ecosystems. Optimism and Arbitrum are competing with Ethereum over fees and usage, all while the core developers decide we are not going to scale the capacity of Ethereum at all anymore. And I can maybe dive into that in a little bit more depth, why I can say that with confidence. But as it stands today, there is zero commitment to on-chain scaling. They literally raised the gas limit from the roadmap. They removed it. So sure, they can implement technologies that make Ethereum more efficient, that add to its quote-unquote scalability. But if you don't increase the gas limit, none of it matters. Because you're still stuck at, I would calculate it at about around 100 TPS, which is nowhere near enough. Nowhere near enough. So what it seems like to me, it's a bit like Ethereum is rolled around and is showing its belly to predators. It's a surrender. It's a surrender to even try to be competitive. And obviously, you know, modular scaling advocates, they would say, well, everyone's just going to use these layer 2s, and the layer 2s are going to pay the layer 1, and this is how it works with this layered approach to scaling. Right? This is the argument. Let me take a recent example. I think you've all seen these statistics. Coinbase has made $40 million in revenue because of Base. And correct me if I'm wrong on these numbers, but I think only about 200,000 or so, can someone correct me? Maybe, yeah. It was a very small fraction of that is going back to the layer 1. Tiny fraction of that money, like orders of magnitude less. So basically, what Base is doing is they're taking all of this usage, they're getting all of these fees in, and only a small amount is going back to the layer 1, right? What I'm proposing, wouldn't it be better if the layer 1 scaled? If the layer 1 scaled, all of that value would just flow directly to Ethereum, right? If the system could just scale. But instead, we're in this situation. And also want to point this out, this was mentioned in the panel before. If you look at the top 10 layer 2s right now, according to L2B, every single one of them has admin keys. They can steal all user funds, okay? They can censor transactions. They can deny you access. That's not the cypherpunk dream. That's not scaling Ethereum. That's something else entirely. That's not what I signed up for. I left BTC entirely by 2017 because I was fed up. I was fed up with Bitcoin not scaling. I was fed up with it abandoning its original vision, which was money for the world. You can't be money for the world if only a few people can use it at the same time. You know, that's ridiculous. And the claim, obviously the claim by layer 2 advocates is, well, we will decentralize in the future. I just want to point out, as a blockchain researcher, as an investor in this space for over a decade, the amount of times I've heard people say that versus the amount of times that actually happens is just tiny, tiny. And there's something to be said. Yes, I believe in individuals doing the right thing at times. That happens. People can be heroes. People can give up on money in order to some greater ideal. I do believe in that, right? But if we're looking at a system of millions of people, and there's this type of collective incentive mechanism, collective governance, then I'm not going to rely on the goodwill of individuals. If I'm predicting what's going to happen with this system, I'm going to say that the majority of people are going to follow their own self-interest. That's my position. Yes, if you're talking about large systems of people, if you're talking about civilization and society, the way you predict the future is by looking at incentives. You don't just wish for the best. That's a losing strategy. Okay, so today, all of these layer 2s are centralized, effectively. And the idea is, oh, well, they're just going to decentralize. Okay, so you're saying they're going to willingly surrender their power? Coinbase is just going to give up. By the way, Coinbase is a for-profit company based in New York, okay? I love Coinbase, by the way, for the record. Love Coinbase, fantastic company. They've done a lot for cryptocurrency. I just want to point that out, and I really respect them for standing up for cypherpunk principles for when it mattered. They picked their battles, but I appreciate that. And as a company, I don't blame them for building Base, right? Of course they build Base. They just made $40 million off it, okay? But in order for the fragmentation problem to be solved, and let me just come back to fragmentation. So the fragmentation destroys the UX. The fragmentation takes away fees from the base layer. The fragmentation destroys composability. Composability being, you know, the reason why Ethereum DeFi was so successful in the first place. You know, that's also destroyed now. You know, what you're saying is that if Base were to decentralize, they would have to give up all of that revenue. They'll probably make over $100 million this year. It's a for-profit company with a board. Do you seriously think they're just going to give up that revenue? Like, that's crazy. Really, like, if I was on that board, I would vote no to that, even though I love decentralization, right? Like, that's crazy. So I think there's so much of this, like, wishful thinking, and we have a lot of, like, computer scientists and engineers, and I would really just emphasize, think about the human element here. Think about that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that these lessons that we've seen repeat through history again and again and again, these apply to Ethereum as well. These apply to cryptocurrency as well. And we can be so blind to it sometimes. It's especially upsetting considering that the exact same thing happened in BTC, right? Like what I'm talking about, BTC pivoted away from layer 1 scaling in favor of layer 2 scaling. Right? The BTC chain got extremely congested, and that is when Ethereum became extremely successful. That is not a coincidence, okay? Because Ethereum was committed to layer 1 scaling. I signed up to Ethereum because I'm like, yes, sharding, layer 1 scaling, fantastic. I'm on board. I was a diehard Ethereum supporter from the day it was launched. I was mining it in the first week. It's literally been the largest asset in the fund I manage for the vast majority of its history, until very recently, actually. Because I've come this far and I'm just more and more losing hope for Ethereum because a lot of the core developers, a lot of your leadership is doubling down on this. And I don't think change will come from leadership here. Because they're doubled down, because they have massive perverted incentives, like billions of dollars. Think about this example. If I'm a core developer, right? I could go work for the foundation and get paid a wage, right? Or I could found a layer 2 blockchain, do a token distribution, maybe even I'd make hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a lot better than a wage, right? I mean, this is part of the perversion and the corruption that's happening in cryptocurrency right now. You have only, like the foundation is literally only probably spending no more than a few million on layer 1 scaling, right? No more, really. I mean, real layer 1 scaling. They've abandoned it completely, in all honesty. But then in the layer 2 space, what is it? Exceeding $100 billion of funding probably now. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me. Well, just insane amounts of money. Insane amounts of money. That's corruption, right? That's the people, your leaders are saying, we're not going to scale the layer 1. We're going to do this layer 2 thing. And this layer 2 thing, look, my main critique of layer 2 is the fragmentation issue. I'm going to go back to that. I want to go back to the core, and I'm going to check my notes here a bit too. The main thing, and the reason why I think it can't be solved, and the thing I found really exciting was shared sequencing. Who's aware of how shared sequencing works? Put up your hand. Wow, 2 people, 3 people? Oh my God. Okay, I was expecting a little bit more at an Ethereum conference. Okay, that's fine. Okay, let me explain shared sequencing for you. So Justin Drake recently came out on a bunch of prominent podcasts. Justin Drake, fantastic researcher, by the way, not just because he has the same name as me. And he came out and he actually acknowledged, yes, fragmentation is a problem. And that's that validation I was talking about before, where I think a lot of the Ethereum community was pushing back, and now the core developers themselves are saying fragmentation is a problem. Okay? Who agrees that fragmentation is a problem? Hands up. There we go. More people that know what the proposed solution is, at least, so that's good. So the proposed solution by the Ethereum core developers, as far as I see it, is this idea of shared sequencing. So as of today, the majority, well, pretty much almost all layer 2s have what's known as a centralized sequencer. And that's where the majority of, say, base revenue is coming from right now. They're able to order transactions, they're able to extract MEV, and they're able to skim the fees. And the idea behind a shared sequencing is that, and in principle, I'm actually in favor of the idea. I actually like the idea. I do. I just don't think it's possible to implement for social coordination reasons, and I'm going to get into that more. Now, what the shared sequencer does is, instead of everyone just using their own centralized sequencer, how about we put the sequencer on the layer 1? Which in principle I like, right? Because I want to enshrine everything on the layer 1. I'm a monolithic scaling guy, right? So in principle, I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. This is a step in the right direction, right? However, and here comes the problem. In order for that to work, everyone needs to use the same shared sequencer, okay? And we're in an environment here, this environment, where optimism is saying, hey, we have a solution to the fragmentation problem. It's the optimism superchain. And then EitherLayer comes along and they say, hey, we have a solution to the fragmentation problem through EitherLayer. And then Polygon comes along and they say, hey, we have a solution to this interoperability protocol because of the AG layer, right? And Arbitrum also has an equivalent thing, and there's Coffee, there's a bunch of them, right? So this is the irony of it. It makes me sad and laugh at the same time, but when I hear these people talk about, when I hear Optimism or Arbitrum or Coffee say, hey, we're solving the fragmentation problem because we're building the shared sequencer that everyone's going to use, and then you're all going to pay us a fee. It's not gonna work. See, this is a free market, and what naturally happens is that you're gonna have competing parties with each other in a real free market, which is good, right? That's a good thing, okay? But the idea that Base will give up its ability to censor, so be compliant, right? Will give up all of its revenue in favor of this higher ideal of using the Base sequencer, I think is total nonsense. I really do. I don't see a path from A to B. Even though technologically it's completely feasible. I acknowledge that. The problem is social. The problem is coordination. And the irony behind all of this is that's the problem that the layer 1 solves. The layer 1 is supposed to be a credibly neutral platform that we can all come together around, a common shelling point. This is why I believe in layer 1 scaling. And if I'm being completely fair to the modular advocates, I think at least the ones that I most respect, okay, like their position is that it's impossible to scale the layer 1. That is their position. I mean, who agrees with that statement, that it's impossible to scale the layer 1 while preserving decentralization? Hands up. Oh, one. Oh, wow. I think last year was very different. That's amazing. So we're getting further. Who thinks it is possible to preserve decentralization while scaling the layer 1? Hands up. Oh, wow. I was not expecting this at an Ethereum conference, a very enlightened crowd. So if it is possible to scale the layer 1 while preserving decentralization, all of these trade-offs that we're making, the fragmentation, the trust trade-offs, the high fees on the L1, like all of this, the horrible UX, as Joel very well described, you know, oh, do I have Arbitrum USD or Optimism USD? Oh, do I need to go through this bridge or that bridge? It's a total nightmare. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not taking any UX seriously unless it's just like one click. Like seriously, it should just work. The way it should work, this is how it should work, right? So I have Ethereum, you have Ethereum, okay? And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna scan a QR code and I'm gonna hit send. That's it. That's it. That works. That's how Ethereum worked for forever until it became congested. And now the layer 2 experience is very different. Okay, so I have ETH, you have ETH. What layer 2 are you on? Can I transact with you directly? Oh no, I can't. No, I need to go through a bridge first. Oh, that bridge is centralized, so I'm getting some risk. You know, hundreds of millions have been lost in bridge hacks, FYI. And then, okay, is a bridge. Is the layer 2 secure? Well, like I said, all of them have admin keys right now. All of them can censor. That's a lot to consider, isn't it? That's a lot to consider. And it just, if you consider those comparisons in UX, it's not even a competition anymore. And look, Ethereum pursued sharding for most of its history, and it pivoted away from it silently, I would say 22, 23, right? And I think it should pivot back. And when I talk to some of the core developers, even though I have the utmost respect for some of these individuals, they tell me that sharding is impossible. That's what they tell me. Sharding is impossible. It blows my mind, considering that we have multiple sharded chains fully implemented in cryptocurrency right now, proving them wrong. So all of this entire layer 2 scaling roadmap is based on a false dichotomy. The false dichotomy is we can't scale the layer 1 while preserving decentralization. And all of this, people will point back to the blockchain trilemma. I'm telling you today, the blockchain trilemma has been solved. It's been solved, okay? When Vitalik first talked about the trilemma, I think it was in the 2015 paper or 14, I don't recall exactly. You know, he referred to the trilemma as this is a scaling trilemma that applies to traditional blockchain designs. Yeah, that's why he was pursuing sharding, because it's a non-traditional blockchain design. We can overcome these limitations. you know? And look, I think a lot of you might not like Solana today, and I have my own critiques of Solana. It's far from perfect. There's a lot of flaws. But the fact that Solana's been outperforming the way it has, the fact that Solana, even with all of the problem it's going through, which is even more embarrassing for Ethereum, by the way, considering the crappiness of Solana, it still has more TPS than Ethereum and all layer 2s combined. You're losing. You're losing the main use cases that people actually use blockchains for right now, which is the speculation and the meme coin and all the stuff us technical people hate. But those are the stepping stones towards mass adoption. Okay, open your eyes. Ethereum is on a train, it's heading into a brick wall. And yeah, it's gonna be a slow death, just like BTC in my view. Slowly losing its dominance over many years, and you can continue believe and you can have your little niche coin. But I'm all about global domination. I'm all about like freedom, right? Like I'm all about making the world a better place with this technology. And I just don't think this modular scaling roadmap can do that. And it's just utterly uncompetitive. There's no way that can actually succeed. And I don't see the proposed solutions working. And those do come back to this idea. And the incentives are perverse. I mean, there's a lot of talk of other potential technologies like ZK EVM and these type of things. But the situation we're in now, let's say Ethereum were to scale. Ethereum scales its main chain. What happens to Optimism? What happens to Arbitrum? What happens to ZK Sync? What happens to all these blockchains? Huh? Yeah, they disappear. They become worthless. Billions of dollars down the drain. So yeah, this whole idea that, oh, Ethereum will scale if they can, no, I'm not convinced of that at all. I'm not convinced of that at all because there's so much money on the line that's bidding on the contrary outcome. So, and look, from a VC's perspective, it's great, right? You can get in on the pre-sale, you can then dump on retail, you can play the hype wave, you know? But that's not building the future of decentralization. That's not building the future of cryptocurrency. That's a bait and switch. That's not what I signed up for. That's not the cypherpunk vision. So yeah, I think Ethereum, and look, the leadership is gung-ho on this. I've been chatting with them, and I don't think they're going to change their mind. So the only way that Ethereum can actually course correct here is that you, the community, needs to rebel against your own leadership. That's not easy, right? That's what happened in BTC with the block size debates, and they failed. Even in BTC, when the majority of industry was on board with bigger blocks, the majority of miners were on board with bigger blocks, the majority of companies were on board with bigger blocks, the majority of users, the majority of stake, was all in favor of bigger blocks, and they still lost in favor of what the developers wanted. Not what the people wanted, not what the market wanted. And this comes down to the core problem in all of this, that I think a few minutes left. The core problem in all of this is this. Ultimately, this is scalability is a problem, yes, but the bigger problem is governance. Because how do we get in this situation in the first place? How could this repeat again and again? It's clearly a systemic flaw in governance. It's clearly a set of perverse incentive that's going to lead to the same outcome again and again. We need to escape that cycle. I hope Ethereum can do that, but over time, I'm becoming more and more skeptical of that actually becoming a reality. And that makes me very sad because there's a lost opportunity there. You know, I care about this movement. I want to see mass adoption. And now, you know, when I talk to a lot of people, people say, oh, I don't believe in cryptocurrency because it's slow and expensive. Yeah, I don't believe in that either. Okay, I don't. And I also don't believe in compromising in terms of your custody. And I don't believe in compromising in terms of censorship. It's mind-blowing that some of you even think that's okay. You know, so the solution is a pivot back to a sharded system. I think it's unlikely, so the more likely solution is people are just going to ape into other cryptocurrencies, even if they are Solana, which should make you all feel even worse. So thank you, everyone.
Actually, here, hold on to this for a minute. Awesome. Thank you so much, Justin, for this very spicy, very, very enlightening conversation. I'd love to pull up the Slido so we can answer a few questions. Ah, yeah. All right, here we go.
Don't go easy on me, okay? Bring it on.
All right, the first question we have is, if BTC and ETH are dying L1s while representing the majority of the market cap, what is the actual solution for trustless scalability?
Oh, I really appreciate this question because I had it in my notes to actually cover the alternative solution here. So the alternative to me, I mean, my favorite solution is sharding. And the reason for that is because it's a form of horizontal scaling. Vertical scaling, I think we can all agree is, quadratic scaling, we can all agree is a bad idea, right? Because if you increase capacity times 10, you can do that once, increase capacity times 10 again, your costs are maybe going to go up 100-fold after that. So it's not a sustainable way to scale a blockchain. I can all agree with you there in principle. So I particularly like sharded systems because it's a true form of horizontal scaling where we can increase the capacity of the network while simultaneously keeping node requirements low. Look, I'm not against purely parallelized blockchains like Solana as well. I just think they have a significantly lower upper limit. And what they are doing in effect compared to sharding is they're actually trading off capacity for speed. And in sharded systems, the trade-off, just to be fully transparent, is that a sharded system adds a few seconds to confirmation time. So there is a legitimate trade-off between something like Solana and a sharded system. However, if you compare that to the layer 2 ecosystem, obviously it's way worse when it comes to layer 2s and settlement times between chains, etc. So,
great. And we have another question. What are the competitors to which Ethereum would lose? You did talk a bit about Solana, but is there anyone else?
Well, that's like the $1 trillion question, isn't it? That's what everyone wants to know. Where do I put my money? Look, I don't think anyone really knows that to any degree of certainty. I mean, it's my job to know that. That's literally what I do. I would recommend people diversify. I mean, what I tend to do is I go, okay, I want to invest in Ethereum competitors. I'll invest in like 5. And if 2 of those do well, I'm doing great. So, because some things are just not, you know, even if you're just the best researcher in the whole world, just some things are just outside of our ability to predict, from politics to narrative to global events. So, you know, diversify that. But I think what matters to me is it a scalable system? Is it decentralized? Is it programmable? I like proof of stake as well. By the way, Ethereum's economic model, what happened with EIP 1559, love it. It's beautiful. It's the best economic model as far as any cryptocurrency goes. That's also something I look for.
I think that goes into this other question we have, naming L1s that have solved the blockchain trilemma.
Yeah, there's a few. So EGLD, also known as Multiverse X, formerly known as Elrond, also known as eGold. Terrible marketing, very disappointing. But actually, I believe it's the only blockchain that has fully implemented sharding, and properly so. There's 4 shards validated by separate validators, of course, randomized shuffling, the works. And it's got all the other bells and whistles to it as well. The more well-known blockchain, obviously, is Near. So Near hasn't fully implemented sharding yet, but they're close. And then there's Ton as well. It's also a sharded blockchain, but Ton has got a lot of red flags attached to it. So, you know, word of warning there, buyer beware. And obviously you have the parallelized chains as well. So it'd be your Solanas, your Suis, your Aptoses, your monads coming along, which has a parallelized EVM. But this is the perfect example of complacency in Ethereum, by the way. I see no good reason not to parallelize the EVM. Even if you don't care about increasing gas limits. If you parallelize the EVM and you do it with a way like minimal trade-offs, right? You can decrease your node requirements like 8-fold, right? It's ridiculous. We all have computers with multiple cores. Why would you not utilize multiple cores? It's just this ridiculous bottleneck, but it goes to show there's a degree of complacency that happens once a cryptocurrency becomes successful. People get comfortable. Fire some of these developers is what I would say. Hire new ones.
I think that's a perfect spicy note to end this Q&A on. Justin, I'm sure will be available afterwards for all your further questions, but I just want to give you another round of applause for this incredible talk.
Thank you, everyone.